A pregnant woman carrying quadruplets was cruelly deceived and abandoned by her husband. Years later, she returns as a wealthy agribusiness magnate. When everyone discovers her incredible transformation, they are left in complete shock. What happens next reveals a perfect revenge. Before you watch, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're from so we can bring you even more stories. The ultrasound monitor let out a deafening beep as Amelia collapsed into the chair, her legs giving way under the weight of the news. 4 distinct heartbeats, the doctor announced, her voice echoing like distant thunder. The room spun violently as Amelia gripped the edge of the examining table, her knuckles white with tension. Hot tears streamed down her face as she stared at the screen, where 4 small dots pulsed out of sync with her racing heart. Quadruplets! The word was a strangled whisper from her dry throat. Are you absolutely certain, doctor? Without a doubt. The doctor pointed to each of the pulsating circles on the bluish screen. Here they are, all with detectable heartbeats, although her index finger hovered over one of the circles, hesitant. This one has a slightly irregular heart rhythm. We'll need to monitor it closely. In the clinic parking lot, Amelia gripped the steering wheel so tightly her fingers tingled. The tropical storm battering the car was a perfect mirror of the turmoil in her chest. She had to face William today, before her courage drained away like the water now flooding the asphalt. The drive back home was a journey through a fog of contradictory emotions. Amelia's hands gripped the wheel as she drove down the dirt road that led to the Thorne family farm, a property her husband's family had owned for 3 generations. The late afternoon sun made the dust kicked up by the tires shimmer like suspended gold. It was September, and the newly planted soybean fields stretched like a green carpet as far as the eye could see. How will he react? The question pounded in her mind. How will we take care of 4 babies at once? The Thorne family mansion loomed on the horizon, a colonial building with wide porches and tall windows, surrounded by century-old oak trees. This place had never truly felt like home, not even after 3 years of marriage. There was something in the atmosphere, perhaps in the thick walls, steeped in the history of a family she didn't belong to by blood, that always made her feel like a stranger. She parked the car and took several deep breaths before getting out. She needed to be calm to break the news to William. Her husband was a practical man, focused on numbers and results. They had talked about children, of course, but always as a plan for the future, after the farm reached certain productivity levels, after they expanded into new areas, always after. Upon entering the house, the scent of the orchids that decorated the main living room, William's mother's favorites, seemed more intense than usual, almost suffocating. Or maybe it was just her senses, heightened by pregnancy. William was in his office, as he always was at that hour, sitting behind the imposing solid wood desk that had belonged to his grandfather. He seemed engrossed in spreadsheets. He didn't even notice her presence until she gently knocked on the ajar door. "Hi!" Her voice sounded strangely small in the spacious room. He looked up from the spreadsheets, an automatic smile forming on his lips. "Hey, how was the appointment? Is everything okay with you?" Amelia's heart raced. This was the moment. She crossed the room and sat down in the chair in front of the desk, placing her purse on her lap. "William, Her voice failed. "How do you tell your husband that instead of 1 baby, you're having 4? "I'm pregnant." His face transformed. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. And for a brief moment, Amelia saw something that looked like genuine joy. "Pregnant? But that's—" he began. But she interrupted him. "It's quadruplets, William. We're having 4 babies." The silence that followed was thick, almost palpable. The smile froze on his face, gradually turning into an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of shock and something that dangerously resembled contempt. 4? His voice was cold, distant. This wasn't in the plan, Amelia. I know, but 4 more mouths to feed? This is going to ruin our plans. He stood up abruptly, making his chair scrape the wooden floor with an unpleasant noise. We just invested in the expansion to the east. We have the new irrigation system to implement. How are we going to afford the costs of 4 children now? The words hit Amelia like physical blows. For the first time in 3 years of marriage, the mask of the loving, understanding husband had completely fallen, revealing someone she didn't recognize. We're not talking about a financial investment, William. There are children. Children we didn't plan for. He was pacing now, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. 1 baby would already be complicated right now, but 4 is practically a disaster. The air in the office grew heavy, unbreathable. The scent of the orchids filled her nostrils, bringing a wave of nausea. Amelia felt tears welling up, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't cry. Not now. The doctor said one of them has a heart condition that will need treatment, she said, her voice firmer than she expected. William stopped pacing and stared at her, a calculating gleam in his eyes. How much will this treatment cost? The question hit her like a slap. He didn't ask if the baby would be okay or if it was serious. Only the cost. At that moment, something inside her broke. An illusion she had cultivated for 3 years completely crumbled. I don't know yet. I need to do more tests. See specialists. He sat back down, rubbing his face with his hands. This is a nightmare, he murmured, more to himself than to her. In the days that followed, the chasm between them only widened. William became increasingly distant, coming home late, leaving before dawn. The meals they once shared in animated conversation about the farm's future were now silent, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware against fine china. The traditional fall festivals, which had always been a joyful occasion with crackling bonfires, music, dancing, and abundant food, passed without William accompanying her. He preferred the company of foreign investors, leaving her to explain his absence to neighbors and friends with forced smiles and empty excuses. One morning, as the oak trees in the yard bloomed, announcing days of abundance, Amelia felt a wave of renewed energy. She was 4 months pregnant now, a small baby bump starting to show under the light blouses she wore to combat the early spring heat. She decided to reorganize her old office in the house, a space she had abandoned when she started working directly in the fields, implementing the innovative techniques they had learned in agricultural engineering school. Among dusty books and notebooks, she found her old university journal. She sat on the floor, with some difficulty due to her belly, and began to leaf through the pages. There was the old Amelia, determined, courageous, full of dreams and projects. The girl from a humble background, who had earned a full scholarship to one of the best universities in the country. The student, who had stood out among hundreds, who had developed internationally awarded sustainable farming techniques. What happened to you? She whispered to the graduation photo clipped between the pages. In it, she smiled broadly, diploma in hand, her eyes shining with pride and expectation. She remembered meeting William during an internship at the Thorne family farm. How impressed he seemed with her knowledge and dedication. How he courted her with expensive gifts and passionate declarations. How he proposed under a starry summer sky, promising her the world. When did she start to fade? When did she allow her dreams to become secondary to his? When did her voice, once so confident in presenting projects and defending ideas, become an almost inaudible whisper? A flutter in her belly brought her back to the present. It wasn't pain, just a movement. One of her babies moving, reminding her of their presence. She placed her hand on her stomach, feeling. You're in there, aren't you? 4 little warriors. Something changed inside her in that moment. A resolve began to form, still hazy, but gaining strength with every heartbeat. She was no longer alone. She would never be alone again. She had 4 lives depending on her now. 4 reasons to be stronger than she had ever been. She got up from the floor with a new determination. If William couldn't or wouldn't be the partner she needed on this journey, she would go it alone. It wouldn't be the first time she faced obstacles without support. She came from a family where women always found a way, always moved forward, always survived. In the following week, during another checkup, came the confirmation of what the doctor had initially suspected. One of the babies had a heart condition that would require specialized treatment after birth. It's not fatal, the specialist assured her, but it will demand specific and, yes, expensive care. We'll face this together, the doctor said, squeezing her hand in a gesture of solidarity. There are excellent specialists in the capital. Together. The word echoed in her mind as she drove back to the farm. Who would be with her on this journey? Certainly not William, who grew more distant with each passing day. She parked the car under the shade of a leafy mango tree and sat there for a few minutes, watching the big house in the distance, the tall windows, the wide porches, the well-kept gardens. Everything so beautiful, so perfect on the surface, just like her marriage had been. She walked slowly toward the house, feeling the warm afternoon sun on her face. Upon entering, she noticed an unusual silence. Normally, at that hour, the employees would be busy preparing dinner, cleaning, organizing. But today, the house seemed deserted. She went up the stairs toward the bedroom, but a light on in William's office caught her attention. The door was ajar. She approached quietly, without intending to snoop. Just curious about his presence at home at that hour of the day. That's when she heard his voice, low and tense, on the phone. No, it's not possible to cancel now. Yes, I know the situation has changed, but the contract is already signed. The papers are already registered, everything as we planned. No, she doesn't know anything, and she won't know until it's too late. A chill ran down her spine. What papers was he talking about? What was this contract she knew nothing about? She backed away from the door without making a sound, her heart pounding. Something was wrong, very wrong, and she needed to find out what it was before it was too late, as William had said. That night, she couldn't sleep. Lying next to her husband, who was breathing peacefully as if he didn't carry the weight of secrets, Amelia felt more alone than ever, but also more determined. She would protect her children at all costs. She would discover what William was hiding, and most importantly, she would rediscover the strong woman she once was. Because now, it wasn't just for her. It was for 4 small hearts beating inside her, trusting in her protection, in her strength, in her unconditional love. The next morning would bring answers, and with them, the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever. The typical spring humidity filled the air as the dawn painted the blooming oak trees in the orchard gold. Amelia watched the spectacle of nature from the bedroom window, distractedly caressing the small curve that was beginning to form on her stomach. 4 months pregnant, 4 lives growing inside her, and a marriage that was deteriorating every day like forgotten fruit in the sun. William had slept in his office again. For weeks he had avoided sharing the bed with her, always with excuses of late work, spreadsheets to review, or off-hours international calls. Amelia knew rejection when she felt it. His words on the day of the quadruplets' revelation still burned in her memory. 4 more mouths to feed. This is going to ruin our plans. She got dressed with renewed determination. She wouldn't let his indifference consume her. The babies deserved a strong, whole mother. She went down the stairs of the colonial mansion, each step creaking lightly under her feet, as if the house itself protested against the tension in the air. In the spacious, impeccable kitchen, Mrs. Davis, the housekeeper who had worked for the Thorns for over 20 years, was brewing fresh coffee. "Good morning, dear," she greeted with that welcoming smile that had always been a safe harbor for Amelia. "Mr. William left very early. Says he's spending the day at the Western Branch, checking out the new irrigation systems." Amelia sighed, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Relief at not having to face her husband's distant gaze over breakfast. Sadness because she never imagined the day would come when she preferred his absence to his presence. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis. I'll just have some juice. The nausea is still strong." The gray-haired woman with hands marked by hard work looked at her with maternal eyes. "You need to eat right, dear. It's 5 mouths now, isn't it?" "Indeed, 5 mouths." The phrase was so similar to what William had used, but it was filled with genuine affection instead of contempt, making her eyes sting with unshed tears. "Mrs. Davis," Amelia hesitated, biting her lower lip. "Have you noticed anything strange about William's behavior in recent weeks? Besides the usual, I mean." The housekeeper paused, her hand suspended over the coffee maker. For a moment, she seemed to weigh her words. "It's not my place to speak of my employers' lives," she began cautiously. "But you've been like a daughter to me since you came here." She approached, lowering her voice. "He's been having a lot of closed-door meetings with that notary from town, Mr. Smith. Locked doors, hushed voices. And last week, when I went to clean the office, I found several folders with your family name on them. Grant, isn't it? Land documents, from what I could see." Amelia's heart raced. The land she had inherited from her maternal grandfather was her only personal asset. Separate from the Thorns' possessions. Small in comparison to William's family's empire, but strategically located and extremely fertile. Land that William had always insinuated should be formally incorporated into the family properties for administrative simplification. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis," she murmured, her mind working quickly. "I think I'll take a day off tomorrow to organize some papers in the office." The housekeeper nodded, a worried look crossing her wrinkled face. "Take care, dear, and if you ever need anything." Amelia squeezed the woman's hand gratefully. At least she wasn't completely alone. William's office was impeccably organized, as always. Bookshelves were neatly arranged, the mahogany desk so polished it reflected the light from the tall windows. The subtle scent of wood and leather that he so appreciated filled the room, an environment that projected power and control, just like the man who occupied it. She began to open drawers methodically. Farm contracts, financial reports, correspondence with suppliers, and international buyers. Nothing out of the ordinary. It was when she approached the small safe built into the wall, partially hidden by an oil painting of a Thorn ancestor, that her heart pounded. The safe was ajar. William never left it like that. He was obsessively careful with important documents. With trembling fingers, Amelia pulled on the metal door. Inside, several folders organized by color and label. One of them, red and with her maiden name, Grant, seemed to call out to her. Upon opening the folder, the world seemed to slow down. Property transfer documents. Her land. The same land she had sworn to her grandfather on his deathbed she would never sell. Now registered in William Thorn's name. And there, at the bottom of each page, her signature. Or rather, a perfect imitation of it. The floor seemed to disappear beneath her feet. The room spun. She held onto the desk to keep from falling, breathing deeply to fight the nausea that rose in her throat. Forgery. He had forged her signature, stolen her land, betrayed her trust in the most vile way possible. Among the documents, she found correspondence with the notary mentioned by Ms. Davis. The scheme became clear. The registration had been done with the help of the corrupt official, who had not properly verified the authenticity of the signatures. A quick, silent, and completely fraudulent transaction. Sitting in William's chair, the documents spread out in front of her like pieces of a macabre puzzle. Amelia felt the weight of reality crush her shoulders. This man with whom she shared her bed, her dreams, and now her children, was nothing more than a thief in a suit. The sound of tires at the entrance brought her back to reality. Through the window, she saw William's car parking. He hadn't been at the Western branch, as he had said. Another lie. Quickly, she took pictures of the documents with her phone and put them back exactly as she had found them. She closed the safe and adjusted the painting. When William entered the office, he found her sitting in an armchair, casually flipping through an agribusiness magazine. "I thought you were at the Western branch today," she commented, carefully watching his reaction. His face registered only a moment of surprise before he recovered. "Change of plans. The irrigation technicians rescheduled." His gaze fell on the desk, checking to make sure everything was in its rightful place. "Did you need something in here?" "Just a quiet place to read," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The nausea gets better when I'm distracted." He sighed, visibly relaxing when he didn't see anything out of place. "How are the babies?" The question sounded mechanical, devoid of any genuine emotion. "Growing. One of them will need heart surgery as soon as he's born." She watched him carefully as she delivered this information. William swallowed hard, his eyes shifting to the window. "We'll deal with that when the time comes." "We will." The word sounded as false as the signature on the documents she had just discovered. In the following days, Amelia kept up appearances while planning her next moves. She discreetly consulted a lawyer in a neighboring town, avoiding the local offices where everyone was friends with the Thorns. The answer was not encouraging. Without solid proof or witnesses to the forgery, it would be difficult to reverse the situation legally. The notary would certainly deny any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, her belly grew, as did her determination. At 6 months pregnant, the exams confirmed it. One of the babies, she now knew they would be 4 boys, had a heart condition that would require specialized medical intervention soon after birth. The cost of the treatment was astronomical. It was on a particularly muggy night, when summer storms threatened on the horizon, that everything came to a head. Amelia found William in his office, drinking whiskey alone, with expense spreadsheets open in front of him. "We need to talk," she announced, closing the door behind her. He looked up, irritated by the interruption. "Can it wait until tomorrow? I'm reviewing the numbers for the new acquisition." "New acquisition?" Amelia's stomach clenched. "You're buying more land while one of our sons needs heart surgery?" William sighed, rubbing his face with obvious impatience. "Business can't stop because of personal problems, Amelia." Personal problems. That's how he saw his own children. "How did you get the money for this acquisition, William?" she asked, approaching the desk. "Was it from the sale of my land? The land you stole from me?" The silence that followed was deafening. His face slowly transformed. The mask of a concerned husband fell completely, revealing something cold and calculating. "So you found out?" It wasn't a question. He took a sip of whiskey calmly, as if they were discussing the weather. "I didn't steal anything. I just did what was best for the family business. That land was underutilized under your amateur management. It was mine. Fine. Promised to my grandfather, and now it's mine." He stood up, circling the desk to face her directly. "Legally registered and already incorporated into the expansion projects." The anger made Amelia's blood boil in her veins. "You forged my signature. That's a crime. Prove it." His smile was one of pure confidence. "The notary has been a family friend for decades. It's his word against yours. A pregnant, emotionally unstable outsider." The cruelty of those words hit her like a physical blow. But it was what came next that shattered the last illusions she still held. "Did you really think I would marry a no-name country girl out of love?" His voice dripped with disdain. "Your land was all I was interested in. Strategically located with the best springs in the region, the marriage was just a simpler transaction than a direct negotiation." The world seemed to fall apart around her. 3 years of marriage, memories of smiles, promises, plans for the future. All an elaborate lie. A trap for a young agronomist who had made the mistake of believing her knowledge and dedication had won the heart of one of the most coveted bachelors in the region. "And now that you have 4 children on the way, you've become an even bigger burden," he continued, relentless. "4 mouths to feed, one of them with health problems. Do you know how much that surgery will cost? More than you'll ever be able to pay with your salary as an agricultural consultant." Amelia recoiled, a hand instinctively protecting her belly, as if she could hide the babies from their father's cruel words. "What are you suggesting, William?" He shrugged, sitting back down. "I have a reasonable proposal. Sign the divorce papers, acknowledging that you're not entitled to anything beyond what you brought into the marriage, which, let's be honest, wasn't much. In return, I'll pay for the boys' surgery and a modest allowance until they come of age." The proposal was as cold and calculating as the man who made it. Amelia felt nausea rise in her throat. "And if I refuse? Then you're on your own. No access to my accounts, no support from my family, no contacts in agribusiness. Everyone knows they're loyal to me, not you. Good luck paying for specialized medical treatments with what you can earn on your own." The ultimatum hung in the air like a sign of the storm gathering outside. Distant thunder echoed, mirroring the turbulence in her chest. "You're not the man I married," she whispered, more to herself than to him. William laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I never was. You saw what you wanted to see, Amelia. The poor orphan who won the regional prince. A nice story, but completely a fantasy." At that moment, something broke inside her, and something new was born. A fierce resolve, a determination she had never felt before. This man had not only stolen her land, but was trying to steal her future and her children's. "I need time to think," she said, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice. "You have until tomorrow night." He returned his attention to the spreadsheets as if she were no longer present. "The papers are in the second drawer. Read, sign, and we can all move on civilly." Amelia left the office with firm steps, despite her trembling legs. In her room, she closed the door and finally allowed the tears to fall. Not from sadness or despair, but from pure rage. Rage at William for his calculated cruelty. Rage at herself for being so blind. As she packed a suitcase with essentials, the rain finally poured down outside, violent and purifying. She grabbed personal documents, some clothes, the little money she had saved. By dawn, she would leave. She wouldn't sign any papers, wouldn't accept the crumbs he offered, as if doing her a favor. "I won't give him what he wants," she whispered to the 4 small beings she carried inside her. "We'll find our own way." The storm reached its peak when Amelia left the Thorne mansion before the first ray of sun. The heavy rain accompanied her silent crying as the taxi she had discreetly hired the night before pulled away down the red dirt road. The driver, an older man who asked no questions, drove carefully through the muddy paths. In her bag, besides her essential belongings, she carried the photographs of the forged documents. She didn't know how or when, but one day she would use that evidence. One day she would return, not as the naive wife who left in the rain, but as a woman who does not bend in the face of adversity. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear in her mind. This was not the end, but the painful beginning of a new journey. A journey she would face with the same determination that had earned her a degree with honors, even from a humble family. The same strength that now drove her to protect her children at any cost. She caressed her belly as she watched the landscape gradually transform, the thorn lands falling behind. "We're a family now," she murmured to her babies, "and no one is going to separate or diminish us." Outside, the storm was beginning to subside, and the first rays of sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the road ahead. The rain had stopped when the taxi parked in front of a brick house in a neighboring town's residential neighborhood. The small, well-kept garden displayed colorful geraniums, wet from the recent downpour. Amelia took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell, one hand on her prominent 6-month belly, the other holding the handle of her suitcase. Jenna opened the door, still in her robe, her brown hair disheveled, her eyes widening as she recognized the unexpected visitor. "My God, Amy, what happened?" she exclaimed, pulling her inside, looking alarmed at her suitcase and her exhausted state. The two had known each other since agricultural engineering school. Jenna, the daughter of small-scale farmers, shared with Amelia not only a love for the land, but also the experience of earning her place in a predominantly male environment. She had been a bridesmaid at Amelia and William's wedding, and now managed the agricultural department of a local cooperative. "It's over, Jenna," Amelia whispered, collapsing onto the floral sofa in the living room. Physical and emotional exhaustion finally taking their toll. "I found out who William really is." Between sobs and pauses to catch her breath, she told her friend everything she had discovered: the document forgery, the theft of her land, the veiled threats about the baby's future, especially the one who would need special medical treatment. "That bastard!" Jenna ran her hands through her hair nervously. "I always thought there was something calculating about him, but I never imagined he would go this far." "Neither did I," Amelia murmured, rubbing her belly in a protective caress. "I was so blind, so stupidly in love." "Don't blame yourself." Jenna sat beside her, holding her hands. "William deceived everyone with that facade of a proper businessman and dedicated husband. You'll stay here with me until we figure this out. The guest room is all yours." The relief Amelia felt in that moment was like oxygen for someone who was drowning. She wasn't alone. She had somewhere to go, someone to rely on. The following days were about adapting to a new reality. Jenna, single and career-focused, rearranged her routine to accommodate a pregnant woman carrying quadruplets in her modest home. The guest room was transformed with a crib, just one for now, as there wasn't room for more, and small pieces of clothing donated by colleagues from the cooperative. It didn't take long for William to discover her whereabouts. Less than a week after she left, he appeared at Jenna's door, his face a mask of public concern. "I came to get my wife," he announced in an authoritative voice when Jenna answered. "Your wife doesn't want to be found," her friend replied, blocking the entrance. "And I suggest you respect that, or we'll have to involve the authorities." Amelia, hidden in the hallway, listened to the exchange with her heart pounding. The determination in Jenna's voice strengthened her. Maybe with support, she could face what was coming. But the sense of security didn't last long. 2 weeks later, while resting after lunch, Amelia noticed Jenna talking on the phone in the yard, her voice low, her body turned away from the house as if she feared being overheard. "She still doesn't know. No, she hasn't signed anything. Yes, the babies seem fine, but the doctor said the smallest one's heart problem is serious. Tomorrow at 10? I can say I'm going to the grocery store." The world froze around Amelia when Jenna turned and saw her at the back door, phone still in hand, her face paling. "It was him, wasn't it?" Amelia asked, her voice almost inaudible. "You're passing information about me to William." "Amy, it's not what you think." Jenna moved forward, her hands outstretched in a plea. "He came to me, offered me an incredible opportunity at the farm, a director position I'd never get otherwise, in exchange for spying on you. It wasn't a question." The bitter taste of disappointment filled her mouth, twice deceived by 2 people she had trusted. "I was going to tell you, I swear. I'm trying to buy us time. Make him think I have influence over you while we look for a lawyer who can actually help." But the excuses sounded empty. In Jenna's eyes, Amelia saw the same calculating ambition she had ignored in William for years. People willing to sacrifice loyalties for personal gain. That night, when Jenna finally fell asleep, Amelia packed her suitcase again. But where to go now? Without close family, with limited financial resources, and a high-risk multiple pregnancy that restricted her work options, desperation threatened to consume her. That's when she remembered Mrs. Davis, the housekeeper from the Thorne family farm. The woman who had always treated her like a daughter, who had been the first to warn her about the suspicious documents. Maybe she could help, at least temporarily. A discreet call confirmed her hopes. Mrs. Davis lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of town, an inheritance from her late husband. "Come, dear," the woman said in a firm voice. "My house is simple, but there's room for you and those children." She left a short note for Jenna. "Thank you for the roof over my head, but I can't stay where there's no true loyalty. Don't look for me." And she left before dawn. Mrs. Davis's cottage was modest, a well-kept wooden house surrounded by fruit trees and a small vegetable garden. The contrast with the Thorne mansion couldn't have been greater, but there was something infinitely more welcoming about this simple space. "My children are all grown and live in the city," the woman explained, as she showed Amelia the room where she would stay. "I've always wanted grandchildren, but they're too busy building careers. Having 4 babies running around here will be a blessing." Amelia's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you, Mrs. Davis." "Repay me by being strong for these children," the woman said, pointing to Amelia's belly. "And by helping me in the garden when you can. My knees aren't what they used to be." The routine at the cottage brought a peace that Amelia hadn't experienced in months. She woke up to the sound of birds, helped Mrs. Davis with light house and garden tasks, and spent entire afternoons researching the heart condition of one of her babies. At night, sitting on the porch under a stunning starry sky, she made plans for the future, a future that seemed daunting, but which she was determined to conquer. It was during one of these contemplative nights, when she was 7 months pregnant, that she felt the first strong contraction. Mrs. Davis, experienced from her own pregnancies and those of many women she had helped over the years, immediately recognized the signs. "Premature labor," she diagnosed, already grabbing the bag she kept packed by the door. "We're going to the hospital now." The following hours were a blur of pain, fear, and blinding lights. The regional hospital was not equipped for a high-risk multiple birth, and Amelia had to be transferred by ambulance to a larger medical center in the capital, 90 kilometers away. "The babies are coming too soon," the doctor explained during the ride, checking her vital signs. "We'll do everything to keep them in for as long as possible, but be prepared." Mrs. Davis held her hand in the ambulance, whispering prayers and words of encouragement. "You can do this, my girl. You and those little warriors." Despite the medical efforts, there was no stopping the birth. After 36 grueling hours, the 4 boys came into the world, tiny, fragile, but surprisingly strong for babies born almost 3 months early. "They're premature, but they're stable," the pediatrician informed her, her expression serious, but not without hope. "Except for the 3rd one, the one we knew had the heart problem. He'll need surgery as soon as he gains enough weight." Lying in the hospital bed, exhausted beyond measure, Amelia watched the 4 babies in the incubators beside her. So small they fit in the palm of a hand, with tubes and monitors connected to their fragile bodies, and yet fighting with all their might to live. "What are you going to name them?" asked Mrs. Davis, who hadn't left her side for a minute. Amelia contemplated her sons for a long moment. "Michael, Gabrielle, Raphael, and David," she finally replied. "Names of warrior angels, because that's what they are. Little warriors, who came into the world to fight by my side. The days in the hospital turned into weeks. Amelia was torn between recovering from the difficult birth and following the baby's development in the neonatal ICU. Medical expenses accumulated at an alarming rate, and her meager savings quickly ran out. It was during this period of financial distress that fate intervened unexpectedly. One day, as she walked down the hospital corridor after another kangaroo care session with Raphael, she was approached by a distinguished-looking man with gray hair and an elegant posture. "Ms. Grant?" he asked, extending his hand. "I'm Julian Thorne. Do you remember me?" The name triggered a distant memory. Julian Thorne was one of the largest landowners in the state, a pioneer in sustainable farming techniques. Amelia had met him briefly during an agricultural conference years ago, where she had presented her thesis on innovative irrigation methods. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. It's a pleasure to see you again, although in such unusual circumstances." The man smiled, his kind eyes twinkling under thick eyebrows. "I happened to hear about your situation. My daughter is a doctor at this hospital." He paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. "I also heard about your knowledge in agricultural science and the techniques you developed. I have unexplored land in the West that needs someone with your expertise." Amelia blinked, confused by the sudden change of subject. "Mr. Thorne, I appreciate the interest, but as you can see, my current situation is complicated." She gestured toward the neonatal wing, where her sons were fighting for their lives. "It is precisely because of your situation that I'm here," he replied, his tone gentle but firm. "I'm not offering you a job, Ms. Grant. I'm proposing a partnership. I have the capital, the land, and the equipment. You have the knowledge, the innovation, and, clearly, an admirable determination." He handed her a card. "Think about it. The proposal includes housing on the property and comprehensive health insurance for you and your children." When the man walked away, Amelia remained motionless in the hallway, the card between her fingers like an unexpected lifeline. The offer seemed too good to be true, exactly the kind of opportunity she had prayed for during sleepless nights beside the incubators. But accepting would mean moving far away, starting over from scratch in unknown territory. Did it mean giving up on fighting for the land William had stolen? Or was it just a strategic retreat, a chance to gather strength to eventually face her ex-husband under more favorable conditions? The internal conflict consumed her as she watched her sons through the glass of the neonatal ICU. Little Raphael, with his heart condition, needed specialized treatment that would cost a fortune. The other three depended equally on care that she could only provide if she had the means. That night, holding the tiny hand of David, the smallest of the four, but ironically the most restless, Amelia made her decision. Her children's well-being came first. If that meant starting over far away, on unknown land, under the tutelage of a stranger who offered a seemingly generous partnership, then so be it. "We'll do this new journey together," she whispered to the baby, who squeezed her finger with a surprising strength for someone so small. "And one day, when you are big and strong, we'll return to reclaim what is ours, by right." The next day, she called the number on Julian Thorne's card. Her voice didn't tremble when she said, "I accept your proposal, Mr. Thorne. When the boys are discharged, we'll be ready to start." On the other end of the line, the man responded simply, "Welcome aboard, partner. Your land in the West is waiting. Your land." The words resonated in her mind, igniting a spark of hope she thought she had lost. Maybe, after all, there was a way forward, not just of survival, but of true rebuilding. The sun beat down relentlessly when Julian Thorne's truck finally reached the top of the hill, revealing the vastness of the land that would be the new beginning for Amelia and her children. Extensive fields, partially covered by native vegetation, stretched as far as the eye could see, bisected by a winding river that reflected the intense blue of the sky. "Welcome to the new lands," Julian announced, parking near a simple masonry building. "I know it looks rustic now, but it has immense potential." Amelia got out of this vehicle carefully, adjusting little Michael against her chest in the sling she wore. Mrs. Davis, who had insisted on accompanying them on this first visit, got out of the back seat holding Raphael, while David and Gabriel slept in their car seats. The quadruplets had just completed 2 months of life, chronological age, although they were still technically in what would be their 8th month of gestation. After weeks in the neonatal ICU, they were finally discharged, with the exception of Raphael, who had needed an extra stay due to his heart condition. Even now, he wore a small monitor that tracked his heartbeat, a constant reminder that specialized treatment would be necessary as soon as he reached sufficient weight for surgery. "It's vast," Amelia commented, observing the expanse of the land. The climate here was different, drier, hotter, with vegetation characteristic of a transitioning savanna. A challenge for any agronomist, but also a blank canvas for new adapted farming techniques. 800 hectares, Julian confirmed. "My father bought this land 40 years ago, but we never had the time or expertise to develop it properly. It was left as a strategic reserve, waiting for the right moment." His gaze swept the horizon before settling on Amelia. And the right moment means the right person. The house that would be their new home was modest. 3 bedrooms, a combined living room and kitchen, a simple bathroom. Furnished with only the basics, but clean and structurally sound. In the back, a small shed would serve as her office and laboratory for her projects. "I hired 2 young women from town to help with the children while you're in the field," Julian explained, pointing to 2 young women who were organizing freshly washed bed linens. "Joanna and Martha are sisters, daughters of a longtime foreman. People we trust." The thoughtful gesture touched Amelia deeply. There was no way to manage 4 premature babies and implement an agricultural project from scratch without help. "Mr. Thorne, Julian," he corrected with a kind smile. "Partners use first names." "Julian," she repeated, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you for this opportunity." "Thank me by making this land produce," he replied simply. "I saw your academic work on adapted farming for transition regions. It was exactly what this property needed, but I never found anyone willing to apply innovative techniques on a commercial scale." His words ignited a familiar spark in Amelia's chest. That same passion for the land and its possibilities that had driven her during her university years. A passion that had been dormant under the weight of recent disappointments. "I'll need time to study the soil, the rainfall, to adapt some techniques," she began, her mind already buzzing with ideas. "Time is something I can offer," Julian interrupted. "The initial capital is guaranteed for the first 2 years, with no pressure for immediate results. I want to build something sustainable for the long term." That night, after settling the babies in the 2 cribs she had managed to bring, Amelia sat on the simple porch of her new home. The stars seemed brighter here, far from the city lights, and the silence was broken, only by the occasional song of a night bird. Mrs. Davis joined her, bringing 2 cups of chamomile tea. "It's going to work out, dear," she said, sitting in the rocking chair beside her. "I feel it in my heart." "I'm scared, Mrs. Davis," Amelia confessed, her hands wrapped around the warm cup. "What if I fail? They're 4 very small babies, one of them needing surgery, and this agricultural project is extremely ambitious. A plant doesn't grow by looking at the size of the mountain it has to climb to reach the sun," the older woman philosophized. "It just stretches a little each day, trusting that the path will reveal itself." The simple wisdom calmed her restless heart. One thing at a time, one day at a time. The initial months were a test of physical and emotional endurance that pushed Amelia's limits. The nights were interrupted by simultaneous or alternating cries, while the days were divided between caring for the babies and the intense work of soil analysis and agricultural planning. Joanna and Martha were blessings in human form, patient with the little ones, efficient with household tasks, and genuinely caring. Even so, there was no real rest for a single mother of quadruplets, especially with one of them needing special medical care. Raphael needed bi-weekly appointments at the hospital in the capital, a 3-hour drive away. Each trip was a complex logistical operation, with the other 3 babies staying with Mrs. Davis, who had offered to live on the property part-time. "My cottage is in good hands with my nephew looking after the chickens," the older woman had assured her. "These little ones need me now." In parallel with the challenges of motherhood, Amelia faced resistance from the local rural community. On her first visit to the regional bank to open the new agricultural company's account, the manager barely hid his skepticism. A woman alone with 4 small children, managing a property of this size? He questioned, his eyebrow raised in disbelief. "Wouldn't it be better to hire an experienced administrator, ma'am? Someone with a knack for agribusiness?" "Doctor," Amelia corrected, keeping her voice firm, despite the anger that boiled inside her. Dr. Amelia Grant, agronomist with a specialization in adapted and sustainable farming. And no, it wouldn't be better to hire an administrator. I will manage the land myself, as agreed with my partner. The manager reluctantly complied, but the message was clear. Doors would not open easily for her in that traditionally male and conservative circle. Local suppliers were no different. Inflated prices for seeds, equipment rented at absurd rates, and delayed deliveries without justification. It was as if the whole community was betting on her failure. "It's always like this with outsiders," Joanna explained one afternoon, as she helped Amelia organize the small lab where she analyzed soil samples. "Even worse when you're a woman alone with children. They think you'll give up at the first sign of difficulty." But giving up was not in Amelia's vocabulary. Each obstacle only strengthened her determination. For every local supplier who tried to exploit her, she found an alternative in a neighboring town. For every closed door at the regional bank, she sought out credit unions more open to innovative projects. Even Julian, who visited monthly to monitor progress, occasionally showed signs of doubt. "Maybe we should consider more traditional crops for this region," he suggested once, observing the detailed maps Amelia had prepared, showing zones for experimental planting. "Soybeans and corn have a guaranteed market. Traditional crops would deplete this soil in 5 years," she replied, pointing to the chemical analyses laid out on the makeshift table. "The composition here is unique, rich in some minerals, but poor in others. We need a specific rotation system and natural soil enrichment techniques if we want long-term sustainability." After a moment of contemplative silence, Julian smiled. "That's why I brought you here. Your vision goes beyond the next balance sheet." The nights were the most difficult period. After the babies finally fell asleep, Amelia spent hours studying, reading scientific articles by the dim light of her lamp, researching new farming methods adapted to the specific conditions of the land. Exhaustion was a constant companion, but also a reminder that she was alive, fighting, moving forward. At the end of the first year, the first experimental areas began to show promising results. Where before there had only been parched savanna, now organized rows of drought-resistant vegetables grew vigorously, using a drip irrigation system she had adapted to local conditions. The initial harvest was modest, but significant enough to attract the attention of some neighboring farmers. "How did you get these pumpkins to grow so big with so little water?" one of them asked, examining the robust fruits with admiration. "A combination of resistant varieties, specific composting, and controlled irrigation," Amelia explained, feeling a pang of pride. "The secret is to work with local nature, not against it. Simple words that summarized months of grueling work, trial and error, and sleepless nights analyzing data. The second year brought new challenges and victories. With the first profits from the experimental harvest, Amelia was finally able to start Raphael's specialized treatment. At 18 months, the little warrior, as she affectionately called her son, was strong enough for the corrective surgery that would normalize his heart function. The monthly trips to the capital, where the specialized medical center was located, became part of the routine. Amelia balanced monitoring the treatments with managing the farm, often holding meetings by phone from the hospital or reviewing production spreadsheets in the waiting room between appointments. "How do you do it, doctor?" the pediatric cardiologist once asked, watching Amelia breastfeed Raphael while simultaneously explaining to an employee over the phone how to adjust the irrigation system due to an unexpected weather change. Amelia smiled, exhausted but determined. "One day at a time, doctor, like those plants that grow in rock crevices. It seems impossible, but they find a way." It was at the end of this second year that her approach began to bear more significant fruit. An international cooperative specializing in organic products visited the property, attracted by reports of her innovative, sustainable farming techniques. "This is extraordinary," the representative commented, walking between rows of different crops that coexisted harmoniously, protecting each other from pests and sharing nutrients. "I've never seen anything like it implemented on a commercial scale." The first export contract was signed 2 weeks later. Small compared to the agribusiness giants, but a significant milestone for such a young operation led by a woman who, just 2 years earlier, had left an abusive marriage with nothing but a suitcase of clothes and 4 premature babies. On the night the contract was finalized, Julian opened a special bottle of wine he had been saving for a memorable occasion. On the porch of the house, which now boasted a fresh coat of paint and curtains made by Ms. Davis, the two partners toasted to the future. "I always knew you could do it," he said, his eyes shining with genuine paternal pride. "But I confess I didn't imagine it would be so fast." Amelia looked at the property she now truly considered hers. The soft lights of the main shed, where samples of new seed varieties were being cataloged. The small lab she had built for soil analysis. The community garden where Joanna and Martha grew vegetables for the house. And, most importantly, the spacious and airy room where her 4 sons were sleeping, growing strong and healthy, including Raphael, who was recovering wonderfully from the surgery. "I have good reasons not to give up," she replied, looking toward the children's room. The scent of the moist earth after the first successful harvest mixed with the smell of fresh paint from the newly renovated house, a perfume of new beginnings, of promise, of the future. It was in this moment of relative tranquility that Amelia finally felt secure enough to take the next step. A decision that had been maturing since she first set foot on that land. "Julian," she began, her voice firm despite her nervousness, "I need your help to hire a lawyer specializing in agrarian law and property registration." The man looked at her with curiosity. "Do you plan to expand? Buy adjacent land?" "Not exactly." She took a sip of wine, organizing her thoughts. "I want to investigate the status of the land that was stolen from me. My grandfather's land." A contemplative silence settled between them. Julian knew parts of Amelia's story, the failed marriage, the discovery of the forged documents, but they had never discussed the subject in depth. "I thought you had decided to put that behind you," he commented finally. "Build a new life here." "And I did," she confirmed. "But that land is my grandfather's legacy, a promise I made to him. And now it's part of my son's future too." Her voice grew stronger. "It's not just a matter of property, Julian. It's a matter of justice." The old landowner studied her face for a long time before nodding slowly. "I know a lawyer in New York, a specialist in complex agrarian disputes. If anyone can help, he can." Amelia smiled, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination. The path she had followed for the past 2 years had not taken her away from her original goal. It had only given her the strength, resources, and clarity to face it under more favorable conditions. That night, looking at the stars that shone intensely over her new land, Amelia made a silent promise. One day she would return to that region she had left under the rain, carrying 4 lives in her womb and a mix of fear and determination in her heart. She would return not as a victim, but as a woman who had built her own empire from nothing. And when that day came, William Thorne would discover the true meaning of underestimating a woman who refuses to be broken. The morning sun reflected on the chrome of the truck as Amelia adjusted the rearview mirror, watching the 4 boys in the back seats. Her little warriors, now 6 years old, were wearing freshly ironed shirts and chinos, their dark hair neatly combed for the special occasion. "Are we there yet, Mommy?" asked Michael, the most observant of the 4, noticing the change in the landscape around them. "Almost," Amelia replied, feeling her heart pound as she recognized the familiar outlines of the mountains surrounding her hometown. "This is the city where I was born, where your great-grandmother lived, where I began my story." 6 years and 3 months had passed since she had left there in a taxi, pregnant and heartbroken, in the pouring rain of a dawn that had seemed like the end of everything. Now she returned not as a fugitive, but as the owner of the largest sustainable agricultural conglomerate in the western part of the state. "Why are people going to look at us at the fair?" asked Raphael, the son who had overcome his heart condition and now displayed the same vibrant energy as his brothers. "Because we're different, champ," Amelia explained, exchanging a knowing look with David, who smiled shyly. "We're 4 identical brothers, born on the same day. That's rare and special." "Like the irrigation system you invented?" Gabriel interjected, who from a young age had shown a fascination with everything related to the plants growing on the family's land. Amelia laughed, touched by the innocent comparison. "Yes, something like that." The truth the boys couldn't yet fully comprehend was that they weren't just returning to learn about their roots. This was the moment Amelia had worked tirelessly for 6 years, the final confrontation with the past that had tried to destroy her. The Regional Agricultural Fair was the most important event on the local calendar, bringing together producers, investors, and authorities from all over the state. The Thorne Mansion traditionally hosted distinguished guests during these days, with William playing the role of magnanimous host, although Amelia knew through carefully placed informants that the family's financial situation had deteriorated considerably in recent years. Mismanagement, failed investments, and a prolonged drought had consumed a large part of the fortune that had once seemed inexhaustible. She parked in the VIP area of the fairgrounds, where a young man in a green vest approached her respectfully. "Mrs. Grant Thorne," he confirmed, checking his clipboard. "Your entourage is already positioned in the premium exhibition sector. Mr. Julian asked me to inform you that the foreign investors have arrived and are waiting for you in the central pavilion." "Thank you," Amelia replied, helping the boys get out of the vehicle. "My sons will be in Mrs. Davis's care while I attend the initial meeting." Mrs. Davis, who was following in another car with 2 assistants, approached smiling. At 68, she maintained the same entertime energy and devotion she had shown since the beginning of that journey. She had truly become the grandmother the Quadruplets never had. "Come on, little ones," the woman called out, extending her hands. "Let's go see the prize-winning animals, while your mom works for a little bit." Amelia watched them walk away, the boys skipping animatedly in their identical outfits, attracting curious and admiring glances. With a deep breath to calm her nerves, she headed to the central pavilion, where her true spectacle would begin. Over the past 3 years, after her initial success in the new lands, Amelia had rapidly expanded her operations. The sustainable agriculture model she had developed had proven to be not only viable, but extraordinarily profitable in times of climate change and a growing demand for responsible products. With the profits, she had established an agricultural investment fund that had quietly acquired strategic properties in the state, including 3 of the largest farms surrounding the Thorn lands. All of this under the name of a carefully anonymous holding company, Clear Waters Consortium, a reference to the stream that cut through her grandfather's land, the land that William had stolen through falsified documents. No one in that town, except her lawyer, knew that the mysterious investor behind the consortium was the same young agronomist who had left in disgrace 6 years earlier. Until today, the buzz in the central pavilion died down as Amelia entered, accompanied by Julian Thorn, now her mentor and partner in multiple ventures. She wore an impeccably tailored dark blue pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun. Her subtle perfume blended notes of jasmine and sandalwood, sophisticated, but with an earthy note that recalled her origins. "It's her," someone whispered. "The agronomist who revolutionized farming in the West. They say she bought 3 farms in the region this year. That irrigation technique that saves 60% of water? She's the one who developed it." The murmurs followed her as she greeted authorities and investors. Her presence was magnetic, no longer the shy young woman who had let William overshadow her at similar events in the past, but a woman who had built her empire literally from the ground up. It was during the charity auction, a traditional event that officially opened the fair, that the inevitable confrontation occurred. Amelia was in the front row when William Thorn went on stage as the master of ceremonies. He was thinner, with premature gray strands at his temples, but still maintaining that arrogant posture she knew so well. His eyes swept the audience as he gave his opening speech until they finally landed on her. The shock was visible, a stumble in his words, a moment of confusion quickly masked with a cough. Amelia held his gaze, a slight smile on her lips. 6 years of planning for this exact moment. The first lot of the auction was a property adjacent to the Thorn farm, strategically important for the expansion of our business, as William emphasized when he announced the opening bid. It was a farm that Amelia knew through her contacts he desperately needed to acquire to implement a new irrigation system, without which his crops would not survive the next dry season. When the hammer was about to fall, confirming the sale to William at the minimum price, since no one else had shown interest, Amelia raised her numbered paddle. 300,000 above the announced price, she declared in a clear, firm voice that echoed through the suddenly silent room. William's eyes widened, a flush of anger rising up his neck. "We have a new bid," he announced mechanically. "Anyone else?" The silence that followed was eloquent. No one would dare compete with the mysterious investor from the West, whose resources seemed unlimited. "Sold to Mrs. Amelia Grant Thorn," he declared, the hammer hitting with unnecessary force. Polite applause filled the room as Amelia walked to the stage for the formality of the preliminary signing. As she approached William, she noticed the sweat on his forehead, the slight tremor in the hand that held the documents. "You've changed," he murmured when she picked up the golden pen to sign. "You never really knew me," she replied simply, maintaining her diplomatic smile for the cameras that were recording the moment. Backstage, away from curious eyes, William tried to approach her again, his face a mask of false cordiality. "What a pleasant surprise to see you, Amelia. It seems you've done well after our separation." "It wasn't a separation, William. It was an expulsion. You kicked me out of the house while I was pregnant with quadruplets after you stole my land with falsified documents." He stiffened, looking nervously around to make sure no one was listening. "That was a misunderstanding we could have resolved if you hadn't run away like a criminal." "Criminal?" Amelia raised an eyebrow. "Interesting choice of words. considering that document forgery and embezzlement are crimes punishable by law. Before he could respond, an imposing figure approached. Gertrude Thorne, the family matriarch and mother-in-law, whom Amelia had rarely seen during her marriage, as the woman spent most of her time managing family properties in another state. Amelia, the elderly woman's voice, surprisingly warm despite her impeccable posture, was firm. "Can we talk in private?" Intrigued, Amelia agreed, following the matriarch to a reserved room in the administrative pavilion. William tried to follow them, but a sharp look from his mother stopped him. "My son deceived me too," Gertrude revealed, as soon as they were alone, without mincing words. "He used the power I gave him as an administrator to mortgage family properties without my consent, invested in failed projects, and almost brought us to ruin." The revelation, although surprising, didn't completely shock Amelia. She had always suspected that William's arrogance would eventually destroy him. "He stole my land," she replied calmly. "He forged my signature. Bribed a notary." "I know," the elderly woman sighed deeply. "I found out 2 years ago when we started having audits because of the financial difficulties. That's why I had him investigated." Her keen eyes fixed on Amelia. "And I also had you investigated. The Clearwaters Consortium is yours, isn't it?" Amelia nodded, seeing little point in denying it. "You have us in your hands, then," Gertrude continued, her voice surprisingly devoid of rancor. "You could destroy what's left of the Thorne farm with a few strategic transactions." "I could," Amelia agreed, "but I'm not seeking destruction, Mrs. Thorne. I'm seeking justice and a legacy for my sons." The matriarch's eyes shone with something that looked like respect. "Then perhaps we can discuss a proposal that benefits everyone." The meeting that followed, including lawyers, and eventually a visibly displeased William, resulted in a surprising agreement. A merger between the Clearwaters Consortium properties and the remaining Thorne lands, creating the largest agricultural conglomerate in the region. The conditions, however, placed Amelia in total control of the operations and guaranteed the legal return of the properties that were stolen from her, now invalidated based on a clause in her grandfather's will that the specialized lawyer had discovered. "It's not revenge," Amelia explained to her curious sons when she finally reunited with them at the end of that transformative day. "It's justice and a legacy." The Quadruplets, although still too young to fully understand the magnitude of the events, sensed that something important had happened. Sitting on the hotel balcony where they were staying, they took in the view of the city that represented their origins, bombarding their mother with questions about the past they had never known. "Is that man our daddy?" Raphael, always the most direct of the four, finally asked. "Biologically, yes," Amelia answered honestly. "But being a father is much more than that. It's about being present, loving unconditionally, and putting your children above any personal interest." 3 months after that fateful reunion at the fair, Amelia completed the last stage of her plan. On the old lands that were unjustly taken, she didn't build her mansion, as everyone had expected. Instead, she established an agricultural school for women in the region, creating opportunities that she herself had not had. On opening day, under an extraordinarily blue spring sky, dozens of young women from humble backgrounds received their full scholarships. Mrs. Davis, standing beside Amelia, cried silently with pride, while the Quadruplets, elegantly dressed, distributed native tree seedlings to the guests, a symbol of the future they were planting. To everyone's surprise, William appeared at the ceremony. Not as an adversary or a bitter ex-husband, but as someone who finally recognized the value of the woman he had once underestimated. "You achieved what I never could," he admitted as he approached Amelia, observing the school that was already bustling with activity. "You turned pain into purpose." Amelia simply nodded, without rancor, but also without illusions. Forgiveness was a process, not an event, and her journey was just beginning. That night, she lay in bed in her new home, modest for her resources, but cozy and full of life, listening to the rhythmic breathing of her 4 sons in the next room. From the garden came the scent of blooming jasmine, bringing memories that could now be revisited without pain. The cycle had come full circle. The young agronomist, who had once seen the ground disappear from under her feet upon discovering a multiple pregnancy, and an imposter husband had transformed every obstacle into a stepping stone, every disappointment into a lesson, every challenge into an opportunity. And in the final equation of her life, the balance was extraordinarily positive. 4 healthy sons, an agricultural empire built with her own hands, and a legacy of opportunities for other women who, like her one day, only needed a chance to flourish.